morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today called Dark Skies. Our speakers today are Thomas Nies, our Managing Partner, and Andrew Bissell, Director at Condor Life 4. As we do with all our webinars, this is a recorded webinar and will be posted on our YouTube channel after this recording ends. And we will be sending an email with the link after the recording. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box and we will be answering those at the end. Thank you. Thomas, do you want to take over?
Morning, everybody. I'm Thomas Nies, I'm Managing Partner at Condor. I'm delighted to welcome you all to our talk today. I came along to do the introduction, but Bianca's so efficient, she's done the introduction for me, so I won't need to talk to you for very long at all. This is, as Bianca said, the latest in our series of lockdown webinars, which have been going on for just over a year now. And even though we can see in the UK some light at the end of the COVID tunnel, Andrew's about to explain to you that that's not what we want. We don't want too much light at the end of any tunnel. We want to get back to where we need to be with our dark skies. We're in an interesting time. There's a lot of focus on how we look after the current and future health of the planet. It's pretty urgent. We're looking to decarbonisation the electric grid. We're looking to reduce the energy we use. Some of this relates to what Andrew will talk about as well, because we've been able to obviously reduce the amount of energy we use in lighting with the advent of LEDs on a large scale. But the flip side of that has been that now it's Christmas every day in lots of people's gardens, and that's not helping dark skies, because now Christmas lights can stay on no matter where you live all year round. And that's just one example, but Andrew will talk about it in more detail. So Andrew heads up Light 4 at Condor, been doing that for the last 15 years. And he also represents the Society of Light and Lighting with respective designing and dark skies. Andrew and his team have been involved in dark sky projects across the globe. 3 examples I know really well, one in the north of England, now one in the Lake District, and one in the Middle East. And it's gaining traction in lots of places. People want to protect our environment and protect the environment we live in and what we can see at night, and get back to a point of where we've got appropriate use of lighting. That's what today's talk's all about. I say it's one of a series. They're all on our YouTube channel, so dip in, have a look at them, ask all your questions. Bianca will moderate and make sure that everybody gets their questions answered in the webinar afterwards. So please give us your thoughts and comments. We're here to learn together, so your contributions are essential. So I just say enjoy the webinar, and I'll hand you over to Andrew to take us through. So thank you, Andrew.
Hi, thanks very much, Thomas. Thank you, Bianca, as well, for setting this up. And thanks to everyone for joining. So I want to talk today about why dark skies are important, and then also just briefly understand what are the causes, or what do we know the causes of dark skies to be, and also look at some of the new things we've learned in terms of the causes of light pollution, I should say, in terms of impacting our dark skies. Also, why is this subject being discussed more now? It's been around for a long time. The International Dark Sky Association set up in the late 1980s, but certainly we're seeing this subject being discussed a lot more now in the last couple of years. I then want to run through a couple of examples, some lighting examples where we can show how we can manage the light pollution and bring other benefits while still delivering the visual impression that people want and expect. And finally, we'll finish with a large-scale citywide project and how that has been managed, such that we start with the intention of having dark skies and excuse me while I just try and get the screens up. We start with the intention of having dark skies, and we actually deliver that right through to the end. So why do we need dark skies? Well, from our own point of view, we've learned over the last 5 years, although it's been known for a lot longer, that light has a huge impact on our health and well-being. And for those who've been involved in commercial projects, office projects, we have seen that this understanding of the circadian rhythm, circadian lighting, and how we need that that input of light in the morning and at midday will help us reset our body clock. And that's a big part of dealing with our health and well-being, and giving us effectively, or leading us towards a good night's sleep. However, if we have light trespass into our room, if we live in a city where there is a significant amount of sky glow, and effectively you can't ever escape that brightness, that night brightness, then that is going to impact on our sleeping patterns. And so what we therefore end up with is this scenario of, we've dealt with this, the resetting our body clock through the lighting that we've experienced at midday and in the morning, but we've not then completed that cycle. And so we need to work more towards dark skies and not having this problem of light pollution in order for our own health and well-being. Likewise with wildlife, whether it's migratory birds or whether it's nesting turtles, artificial light at night does impact on them. It will impact on the routes they take, which way they head, which in turn starts to impact on their feeding patterns, which in turn impacts on their fitness, and ultimately will impact on the population. Another easy and obvious issue with light pollution is the simple fact that any light being emitted into the night sky is wasted energy. It takes energy to create the light, and if all we're doing is pushing it into the night sky, then we're effectively wasting that energy. And finally, the night sky gives us something more than just a view of the stars. Obviously, it does give us that if we have a dark sky, but during this period of lockdown, I think we've all become much more aware of our natural surroundings and the walks that we can go on, and what our local area has to offer. And those of us who live slightly further out from city centres are probably experiencing a little more of that nature, the fields, gardens, parks, trees, etc. And we understand the benefit of natural light during the day, but then to complete that cycle, we also have the dark sky. And for those of us who can experience that dark sky in the evening, it brings with it a tranquility. It brings with it an ability to truly rest and relax. And it effectively, we're switching off from everything else by not having this constant artificial environment where everything is artificially lit or provided. It gives us that tranquility that we need. And so there's a number of reasons there why we need to ensure that we have dark skies. Okay, so what causes light pollution, and what do we understand about light pollution? And these are the four terminologies that you'll commonly hear when people talk about light pollution, and this is well documented. The ILP documents GNO1 guidance notes for the reduction of obtrusive light is probably the most common and well-known document in the UK, but there are other documents. And what we're seeing here are a number of different ways in which people can be impacted by light pollution. So you might have a light fitting, an external light fitting adjacent to your property, and that's causing light trespass. So the light is arriving in your window above a certain threshold level. You might have someone who's overlit a particular facade, and therefore you have facade brightness. Equally, you might have sports lighting or street lighting where the light source itself is extremely bright. It's either poorly designed, it might be at the wrong angle, it might just be the wrong type of fitting for that area, but you have a source brightness. And ultimately, all of these things, including any light that's directed straight into the night sky or reflected into the night sky, is also creating sky glow. And that's that glow of light. If you ever step 20 miles away from a city and you look back towards a city, that's that glow of light that you see over a city. And it can impact you and your enjoyment of the night sky, even if you're 20 miles away, but it certainly impacts the people, the enjoyment of the night sky for the people in the city as well. But there are other forms of light pollution, which I think we're much more aware of now, and certainly over recent years we've become much more aware of. So historically we've always talked about external lighting having an impact on the night sky, and external lighting having an impact on light that's spilling into our properties and preventing us from doing what we need to do and enjoying the space that we're in. However, what lockdown has shown through a number of studies, and yesterday CPRE, the countryside charity, released the data from their star count, which was held a couple of months ago. And what they have shown is that when the star count was undertaken a couple of months ago, 10% more people in the UK are experiencing better quality dark skies compared to last year. And that correlates very nicely with a number of other research papers which have shown that light pollution in cities has reduced during this lockdown period. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is we have fewer cars on the road, so the headlights themselves, we don't have traffic jams of all of these headlights releasing light into the night sky. But one of the other key contributors has been the office lighting. So the office lighting is predominantly off, and on a trip to London a couple of months ago, I noticed that there were only 3 floors of one of the larger towers in London that was actually illuminated at 4 o'clock in the evening. And that's very, very different to how it would have been pre-lockdown. And it got us thinking in terms of how much light are these offices potentially distributing into the environment, whether that be at street level or then being reflected into the night sky or being distributed directly into the night sky. And when you consider a street light might be providing 5 lux, 10 lux or 20 lux to the street area, and you start to compare that to an office where there might be 300 or 400 or 500 lux of light, that significantly more light is within the office space compared to a street light. And if you have full height glazing, you may have 20%, 30% of that light being emitted either down into the street level or arriving onto the desk and the floor of the office and being emitted directly into the night sky. And if you multiply that out by 20 stories, 25, 30-story buildings, this is now a significant amount of light that's being emitted into the night sky. Now in France, they have a law that says the lights must be turned off an hour after the last person has left, which is great. But then if you have security guards, if you have cleaners coming in, then is that then having an impact that the lights are coming back on? So it's great that they have that law, but I think there's a lot more that can be done. So I think something we need to be much more aware of moving forward is this internal lighting, which is causing light trespass, and particularly in a city where the office may be overlighting a residential building, and we need to be much more aware of that. And another contributor to light pollution is very much the idea that we still design with illuminance, we still design with lux levels. So we're always looking at how much light we're delivering onto a surface. And we don't often look at how much light is being reflected from a surface. So if you were to provide 10 lux of light onto a tarmac path or a light grey stone path, the light grey stone path would look considerably brighter. So the argument there is, well, perhaps only provide 5 lux of light or 3 lux of light onto that stone path, because its brightness level will be the equivalent of the tarmac. There's a lot more work needs to be done there, but we really need to start thinking about the reflectance and the material qualities that we're lighting, such that we don't perhaps have this one-size-fits-all lux level that we should be lighting everything to, but we actually start to look at adjusting and adapting that lighting level based on what we're actually trying to light. So we've got the 4 types of light pollution we've always known about: external lighting impacting the external environment. But I think moving forward, we really also need to look at how the internal lighting is affecting the external environment as well. So why is there an increase in awareness? Well, I think a big part of that has been this increase in awareness of our own health and well-being in our workplaces. We've seen the WELL standard, amongst others, come along and highlight to people how important it is to have light at the right time and of the right colour spectrum, in order that we can maintain this body clock, this circadian rhythm. And there's many other aspects of health and well-being that those documents pick up on. And so as we become aware of that, we also therefore naturally become aware of the need to not have light at night. So certainly I think our own awareness of our own health and well-being is a big part of why we're now talking about dark skies more and more. But also, certainly from the UK perspective, we've had about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, the all-party parliamentary group for dark skies was set up. And then in December last year, they actually launched their 10 dark sky policies for the government, which they're looking now to push through into our planning documents. And in order that we can do more with regards to dark skies and controlling light pollution. So you can download the full document from the APPG Dark Skies website, and we can put a link at the end of here. But just going through those policies. So what they've done is they've grouped the policies together. So policies 1 to 3, this is very much about updating the existing legal framework. So the reality is light nuisance is actually a statutory nuisance in the UK and has been since 2006. So if somebody's lighting is unreasonably interfering with your use and enjoyment of your space, or injuring your health, or likely to injure your health, there is already an avenue for you to do something about that. However, there are exemptions to that. And so what the APPG are looking to do is remove those exemptions and make this light nuisance much more strict. Also, we already have mention of light pollution and obtrusive light within planning documents, both in the national planning policy framework and in the local policies. Obviously, there's usually more written in the local policies, and it changes depending which particular policy you're reading. But what they want to do with as they move forward now is make much more extensive and specific reference to controlling obtrusive light, and actually do more with regards to exterior lighting. As I mentioned, I think we also ought to be doing more with how interior lighting impacts on the external environment as well. So these are the first 3 policies, and this is very much aimed at the legal framework. The next 4 policies then are very much looking to supercharge the standards for lighting. Now, there are a lot of standards already which exist, which we make use of in the UK, and I know there are equivalent standards around the world. For a project we've been doing recently has required us to look at what exists around the world. But certainly from a UK perspective, as long ago as 1980, the CIE were looking at obtrusive light in the urban sky. So as we mentioned before, this has been known about for a long time, and people have been looking at this for a long time. A lot of that information makes its way into the British standards and the BSEN documents, and equally then the guidance provided by the Society of Light and Lighting and the Institution for Lighting Professionals makes use of that information in the CIE and BSI documents in order to advise people on how to go about controlling obtrusive light. And as I mentioned before, the most famous one, if you want, is the ILP GN01 document, which was updated in January 2020. But what they want to do, the APPG want to do, is actually start to enforce the regulations. So when we work on external lighting projects, I would say at the moment, probably 70% of the time, we will have to provide a light pollution assessment. It's not on every single job. It very much depends on which area you're doing the work in, what type of the project it is. And once we've produced that, it's accepted if our calculations look right, and we continue with the build. And then there's no follow-up to check that it's been installed correctly, and there's no follow-up to check that it's been maintained correctly. So what they're looking to do is actually identify non-compliance and start to enforce the regulations. Another area that they're very concerned with, and this very much ties in with the recent information released by the International Dark Sky Association, it's about controlling the amount of blue light in at night. We need to put a limit on how much blue lighting we use at night. This is the most damaging in terms of the night sky, in terms of wildlife, and in terms of our enjoyment of the night sky. So we need to control the amount of blue light. Something else they want to do on a more domestic level, more residential level, is to ensure that any product sold at a local superstore or your local hardware store comes with a set of instructions that show you how to install that product in such a way that you don't damage the night sky. I think we've all suffered from your neighbour putting up a floodlight and they angle this thing directly out from the wall. Some of the light arrives in their garden. Most of it misses their garden and goes into the night sky. So they're making it a legal requirement to include mounting instructions. And in many ways that ties in again with the IDA, who have an approved product list, which any manufacturer can apply to have their products added to that list. They get checked, and then there's a series of installation instructions to show how this should be done, how this should be installed. And then, of course, what they're looking to do as well is to tap into this notion of dimming the lighting at night and turning the lighting off at night time. And so it's something that's almost always discussed on projects, and we've certainly seen roads with the lighting turned off at night or dimmed down at night, but there's some inconsistencies into the safety of doing that. There's inconsistencies into when it should be done and when it shouldn't be done. So they're looking to actually get the best advice possible, look at some examples, test a number of installations, and then agree what these dark sky hours should be and when we should dim the lighting and when we should actually turn the lighting off. And finally, what they're looking to do is incentivize dark sky governance. So they're looking to push out to local government to say, if you want to classify your town or city as a dark sky town or city, or if you want to classify part of your city as a dark sky area, then you can do so, and you can set those standards that you expect people to achieve. And what's interesting there is we already come across a number of local authorities who, when you engage with them on external lighting designs, they already have an external lighting strategy document. And at the moment, they're typically aimed at in advising you as to the hierarchy of building lighting through their city, which buildings they want to be lit first and lit most prominently, and which buildings they don't want to be lit, or which buildings they want to be toned down. And so I can see more of those documents being written. I can see more local authorities having those documents such that they're relative to their area. And I think it's very welcome, because whilst a lot of dark sky discussions take place around national parks, really the real damage to the night sky is being done by the cities. So it'll be a great addition to see this governance, that if a city decides it wants to reduce the light pollution it causes, then it can take action and do so. They also want a minister to control and prevent light pollution, and then they also want to be looking to achieve widespread public awareness. So with that in mind, that quite clearly there are things we need to do now already with regards to light pollution, but quite clearly things are going to become more onerous, and we're going to have to be more careful about what we do with our external lighting in the future. I just want to look at three types of facades and spaces to look at potentially what can be done. And this is just a quick look. There are always 2 or 3 options and ways of solving things. So for a modern facade lighting, we quite often are asked to have a look at a linear line of light up a building, or it may be a series of linear lights, it may be a series of horizontal lights on a building. And quite often that's delivered by a linear light fitting with an opal diffuser. And when you mount that diffuser vertically in the facade, what you find is half of that light is being emitted into the night sky, and half of that light is being emitted approximately down towards the person who's viewing the installation. So half of that light is wasted and it's damaging and causing light pollution, and half of the light, almost half of the light, is actually useful. However, there are some simple tricks you can do to change this and have a much improved solution without losing the visual effect. So within that same channel, within that same space, you can actually provide very small directional lights, which are only aiming downwards. So there's no light above that dashed line now. So all of the light is coming down into the space. And whilst the opal diffuser will still scatter some of the light, and a small percentage will be emitted into the night sky, predominantly all of the light is coming down. And what that gave us, when we put some calculation planes around this particular example that we made up, we actually found that we had 99% less pollution. But as another benefit, we were using 70% less energy, because we were only directing the light to where it needed to be seen from. And we also had 20% fewer fittings, so a cost saving in terms of the number of light fittings we were using. And taking a look at heritage facades, quite often a heritage facade would be floodlit, and that may be from grazed lighting close to the building, if the building's perhaps in a city centre and there's a pavement close by, or if you have a little bit more land, you may actually mount the floodlights further away from the building. And another angle of that particular solution is here. And quite common, you may have some uplighters around any statues, and perhaps a lantern, a traditional lantern, over the front of that building. But what we've done with this space is to say, well, okay, we still want to have that uplighting within the door reveal, that there's a quality about that just brings your eye into that space. So we still want to have that uplighting, but from choosing the correct beam angles, we're actually capturing most of that light by the reveal of the doorway, by the detail of the building itself. Some of the light spills past, but we have captured most of the uplighting in that space. But then we look at providing downlighting for the statues, so we don't have the light being emitted directly into the night sky. We then start to look at picking up individual details with smaller lights, and because the light is closer to where it is lighting, you're using a lot less energy to provide that lighting effect. But if we then do still want to have the facade lit, you want to see the building, you want to see the stonework, you want to see everything and explain that building in full, we can still do so. But the mindset is always to light from the top down, not from the bottom up. And obviously with heritage facades, listed facades, there's some care and detail that needs to go into that. But the idea being, let's light from the top down, not light from the bottom up. So what does this actually provide for us? Well, immediately 40% less energy, 90% less light pollution. And when we calculated, we put a calculation plane over the top of the building for the first scheme, we had 80 lux of light that was either being emitted directly or being reflected off the building and being emitted into the night sky. So to put that into perspective, if we're talking about the 5 or 10 lux or 20 lux of lighting we're putting onto a road, with a floodlighting scheme, we've just put 80 lux into the night sky, a considerable amount of light into the night sky. But what we also get from this scheme is we have much closer control of all of the different elements. We haven't just pushed one light solution, one light fitting onto a large part of the facade. We've got much closer control, which I'll come on to on the next slide. But what we're also starting to do with our solutions is we're looking at the total lumens we're using, how many of them are being directed straight upwards, how much of that is being reflected light going upwards, and therefore how much energy are we using. And the outer blue polygon there is the original scheme, and the inner yellow polygon there is the new scheme. So we're always looking to reduce the total lumens, but specifically reduce the direct and reflected lumens, which are actually being used on our schemes. And talking about the close control, what we can now do is have a series of settings through the evening. So we can have the building fully lit, and for high pedestrian traffic, we can still have the majority of the building lit. But then as the evening passes and we have lower pedestrian traffic, we get late at night, so we just perhaps want the entrance lit. And then of course, midnight onwards, or perhaps at another curfew setting time, we only have the entrance lit should anyone need to access or leave the building. if that was a floodlighting scheme or a grazing the facade scheme, you wouldn't have as much control to do that. And so there's benefits as well in breaking up the lighting and being more specific about which elements you light. And then finally, coming on to a landscape lighting scheme, what we wanted for this space was to be able to stand in the middle and look up at the space and look up at the stars and actually see what's going on. It's a very dark area anyway. Quite typical for a lot of landscape designs are multi-headed columns. So you'll have a column, you'll have a couple of spotlights, 3 spotlights on these columns, aiming their light in different directions. But once the light source is above your eye line, whether that's in this instance a 4 or 5 meter high column, or whether that's in a public square where perhaps there's an 18-meter high column, a feature column, when you look up, you've inevitably got those spotlights which are causing you a glare issue, and you often, to see past them, you have to put your hand up to block out the light source. And likewise on this scheme, we've got the traditional tree uplighters. So we decided to turn everything around and bring the majority of the lighting down below waist height, such that when you stand there, although you can see the floor, you can see the pavement that you need to walk on, you can see everything you need to see, and there's enough reflected light that it's also light in people's faces. But actually, when you look up, you're not staring at any light sources. There's nothing that interrupts your view of the night sky. And also, we've moved the lighting into the trees rather than throwing the lighting at the trees from the ground. And what this gives you is it gives you that effect of moonlight passing through the tree. You have a much more natural pattern of light on the floor rather than this just having a harsh circle of light or square of light on the floor. Makes for a much more naturally feeling environment, but one where you can look up and see the night sky. Those particular schemes, when compared, with 50% less light pollution, no in-ground luminaires, which is always a good thing from a maintenance perspective, and dark skies. And you also have a clear view of the sky. There's nothing obstructing your view of the sky. And so finally, coming on to the city scale project, which we're working on. So this is a huge project in Saudi Arabia. There's 27 hotels, an airport, 10,000 worker homes, public spaces, sports fields. It's huge, jetties, bridges, all sorts of things. It's a huge space. But what's worked here, there's 2 things really. What's worked, first and foremost, there's been a commitment to dark skies from the outset. So they have dark skies now, and they've said that they must retain those dark skies. So when they finish building these hotels, they will still be able to enjoy the view of the Milky Way. And one of the ways we've gone about that is we've written with the Red Sea Company a dark sky design guide. Now, this isn't telling people how to design the lighting for each hotel from a visual and a quality perspective in terms of how the hotel looks. So we're not dictating to any of the architects or consultants how they must think about the appearance of the lighting, but we are dictating how they must demonstrate that they haven't caused damage to the night sky, how they haven't actually polluted the night sky. And what we did there was we took a look at all of the documents that currently exist around the world. We took all of the best bits of those documents, but then we also added in these other elements that we know about. So we're asking people to design based on the brightness of the materials and the reflectance properties of the materials. So if you do have a light compressed sand path, let's not put 5 lux of light on there. Let's have a look at what happens if we have 1 lux of light onto that path. How does that appear? How does that appear when balanced with the facade of the hotel? How are we lighting the facade of the hotel? How do we ensure we're lighting from the top down? And it's great to see all of the architects and consultants are responding positively to that. And it's not going to have a detrimental effect on how amazing the space looks, but it is going to have a massively positive effect on the dark skies in that area. And what is also happening is to the north you have the city of Al-Waj, to the south you have the city of Luj, and these are both very well developed cities, and there is there is a noticeable sky glow from both cities. And when you travel through, certainly when we looked at Luj in detail, there's a lot of overlighting of spaces. There's a lot of light fittings which are just pointing sideways or pointing up into the night sky. So as part of improving or as part of ensuring that there's a dark sky quality when you're in this new resort in the Red Sea development area, they are also going to be looking at what happens with the lighting and how to adjust and change the lighting in Alwaj and Umluj in order to reduce the sky glow in those areas. But really, the takeaway is it's that commitment to dark skies from the outset that has made the difference on such a scale of project. So wrapping that up then, what's going to happen? Well, quite clearly the APPG want to push more onerous and more specific legislation through. They want to see the standards change. They want to see planning documents change. And what that's going to mean for all of us is that we're going to have to do more work pre-planning. I think at the moment we'll do a light pollution assessment on the external lighting, and then you will be given approval with conditions to continue the project. What we'll see is we'll have to also perhaps provide a narrative of all of the lighting design to demonstrate that we've considered dark skies, both with the internal lighting and the external lighting, impacting on the environment and impacting on other people. The great news is, and finishing positively, is it's all possible. We can do this. This is not about having to make major changes. This is not about reducing the quality of how we light spaces and how we light buildings. This is not, we're not suddenly going to find ourselves not being able to do things. We're just going to have to be very careful about the detail and designing things such that we deliver the visual quality whilst also protecting the night sky. And again, another positive to finish on, this shouldn't cost any more. It's about detailing the design at the right time and sticking with that. And it'll be an interesting one for projects, D&B projects, where perhaps the concept is handed over. There's going to be a little bit more work required there to ensure that that concept is delivered and the detail is then delivered to protect the night skies. But as I said, this is not about buying more expensive fittings. This is just about detailing the design at the right time. And on that note, thank you very much. And before we go to questions, I'll just highlight a couple of upcoming talks. So we have Martin's Law and what it means for you by Lee Harper and Luke Stevens, and we have Earth Day by Simon Wyatt, and this is what the industry needs to do ahead of COP26. Thank you very much. And I believe we lost Thomas. He had a meeting to go to.
Yeah, he did. I think we have time for a few questions, if that's okay. Someone asked, what about casinos, cinemas, or similar entertainment venues?
Yeah, it's interesting. So one of the projects we showed there was Resort World in Birmingham, and that was a project we picked up for a contractor. So they had been given the concept design of that by a consultant. And they had a lot of lighting, as you can imagine, for a casino in that type of space, a lot of external facade lighting. And we worked with the contractor to detail the lighting such that instead of a linear line of light that sat flush on the surface pointing outwards, it was tucked into a detail so that from the ground looking up, you will see the lighting as you would expect it to be, as the visual required it to be. But if you were to then go above that building and look down, you wouldn't be looking directly at those light sources. So we were able to demonstrate to the planners that all of that lighting was being directed down. None of that lighting was being directed out. So again, it's all possible, but it's about working very closely with all of the people involved, particularly with the contractor and the facade engineer, etc.
Great, thank you. Someone asked, what can we do as lighting manufacturers to support this dark sky?
Okay, there's if you go to the IDA website, easy enough to find, but happy to share some links out after this meeting as well. You will find effectively an approved fixture list, and you can find the criteria for how you actually get onto the approved fixture list. So if you have a look there, and they set certain criteria such that all of the light must be emitted downwards, the lamp must be shielded, the lamp should be 3000 Kelvin or less, although, as I mentioned during the talk, that has changed. So there's now, they're now talking about having 2200 Kelvin or less, with a limit on the amount of blue light below 520 nanometers. But the information's on there. So as manufacturers can have their fittings approved, pre-approved if you like, although as a lighting consultant, we can look at any fitting and we will know if that fitting is going to be suitable for dark skies. But it's not just the fitting, as I say, it's how you use that fitting and how you fit that into a detail. You could have a fitting which on its own would be a completely polluting light fitting, but if you've tucked it into a facade detail or into a trim detail, it can then be perfectly suitable for dark skies.
Okay, another question. Lots of out-of-town distribution centres are 24-hour with well-lit car parks and more nighttime HGV movements due to our next-day delivery demands. How can we limit effects on night skies due to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something we've seen in the Middle East are covered car parks, and that's more to do with keeping the sunlight off the cars themselves as opposed to anything else. And perhaps we just need to start looking at this kind of arrangement where we actually have shelters over the cars, or shelters at least over the walkways, and such the lighting can be underneath those areas so that there's no direct light into the night sky, but also the light is kept local to the car where you need it to be. And perhaps we need to stop thinking about lighting every inch of the car park. We only really need to light such that somebody can get into their car and can walk safely from their car to the building. We don't necessarily need to light the road between the car parking because everyone has headlights. So perhaps we need to get away from the standard that says a car park should be 10 lux or 20 lux, and perhaps we should say the walkway should be 5 lux. Being able to get into your car should be 5 lux, and after that, it doesn't matter if the light level drops.
Okay, thank you. That question was from David Elliott. Another question is from Elliot Horseman. Sorry, referring to the heritage facade examples where different layers of light can be switched off in stages until midnight, where only the doorway reveal is lit. Is it a client less likely to want the expensive lighting of facade if it is only lit for a few hours in its full scheme?
It's a great question. You could argue, why light it if nobody's there to see it? So if we go for a simpler option of floodlight in the facade, if there's nobody there to see it at midnight, then why is it lit in the first place? So what we're doing here is we're still providing a degree of lighting of that building based on the number of people who are walking past. So when it's high footfall, we have more of the building lit. When it's low footfall, we have less of the building lit. So the building still looks good, but it's relative to the number of people who are in the area. It's a good point, though. I mean, the alternative, I guess, is that you have the floodlighting fully on for 2 hours and then you turn it off and just rely on the street light. And yeah, it's good. It's one to think about, actually. Yeah.
Great. What is your take on Bill Gates' sun dimming technology, which aims to block the sun rays? Do you think it should be regulated too?
I'm first and foremost, it's all about sunlight for me. As I've probably bored everyone to death with that one over the years. Absolutely, sunlight. I'm not a fan of trying to do things artificially. It's sunny today. I'm going to go for a walk after this, get my dose of sunlight, and then have a look at doing some work. So we've got to be careful what we let people do and don't do. And I think what we are starting to see that now, people really have switched on to the science, the well-documented, well-researched science that exists behind light quality, and our health and well-being. So you're injuring health if you're preventing somebody access to daylight and sunlight, and therefore it should be regulated. I mean, there's lots of things I think should be regulated. Deep plan offices should be regulated. You just cannot fake sunlight in a deep plan office, you know. So, but then again, you know, finances dictate. Yeah, that's a big question and a bigger debate. Yeah.
More questions are coming through. How do you think about legislation implementation in a place that has very low knowledge about lighting design and a big resistance from the side of suppliers that are making a fortune saturating the cities with a big excess of light?
Yeah, I think this is where the changes we'll see will address that balance, because there quite clearly is at the moment that lighting is very much being driven by those, certainly in some sectors, by those who are making and selling the light fittings. And it's quite hard to challenge that at times. It's quite difficult. And we've mentioned the standards and the guides a number of times there. You know, the standard says 20 lux, then somebody can stand there and say, well, I'm giving you that 20 lux, even though we can step back and say, actually, that space just doesn't need to be lit to that level and doesn't need to be lit that way all the way through the night. And so at the moment, we have very little ability as lighting consultants to challenge this all of the time. We can challenge it, and we do so, and we do have a lot of success, but there are some schemes we can't challenge. And I think the regulation, legislation, the planning documents, where you have to describe much earlier how you're going to go about this, I think we will see a change, and we will start to redress that balance between who's really controlling how much light is being poured into a city. You know, it's yeah, I agree. I think cities are overlit. I think media screens are a fundamental problem, you know, but office lighting being on. There was a scheme we looked at from a light pollution perspective in Newcastle, and one of the most positive things they actually did was to change when the cleaners came round to clean the building. So they used to wait for everybody to leave. So by 6 o'clock, 6:30, everybody had left. The cleaners would come in at 7 o'clock. Now, obviously, on a winter's day, somebody coming in at 7 o'clock, walking down the full length of the office, bringing all of the office lighting on, for the residents who were 50 meters away, suddenly this 4-story building was lit up like a beacon in the dark sky. And they simply changed that the cleaners came in before everybody went home. And you could argue that's not perfect from a cleaning perspective, but you know, it had such a massive positive impact on those residents and on the night sky. That small sacrifice that you had somebody cleaning your area for 5 minutes before they moved on further down the office was well worth it. So I think there are some simple things we can do. We don't have to go mad with lighting controls. There are some simple things we can do.
Good. I think we have time for 2 more questions. There are so many players across the lighting profession and industry, often in competition. I don't feel we're effectively sharing good practice, dark sky friendly solutions. Any thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, it's yeah, you can see from just some of the professional bodies that I mentioned there that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of very knowledgeable people. There's a lot of professional bodies, and it would be great if there were fewer professional bodies in the lighting industry. There's some I've not even mentioned there. How you go about that's a massive task, and lots of people talk about it, but certainly as a lighting designer, I would like to see fewer professional bodies. It's another big topic which would take a whole session. Yeah, so
Another idea for another webinar then. And one last question. Blackout blinds are popular for bedrooms in residential setting, but could this strategy be advantageous in office environments to limit light leak at night?
Yeah, perfect. So the great thing there is you can start to do this. You can have a dual function to those blinds. So if you choose the right type of blind, I mean, blackout is the most extreme. You're absolutely blocking everything that leaves the window, the light leaving the window to the outside. But you could also go for a Venetian type blind. So during the day, you adjust the angle of that such that you reflect the light into your office space. So you control the glare, so nobody sat by the window suffers from glare, but you are reflecting the light further into the office. We did that in our Manchester 1 building, didn't we, Bianca? And so you have the light coming in during the day, and then you can have those blinds adjusted then to prevent the light spill at night. So yeah, whoever said that, yeah, exactly right. You know, we can have blinds to prevent the light leakage at night, but actually if we choose the right blind, we can have a dual function. We can bring the daylight in the daytime and prevent the electric light leaving at night. Good solution.
I think that's all the time we had for today. So thank you to everyone for joining us. And remember, you can always visit our YouTube channel to see all the other webinars that we have done. And you can have a look out on our website as well to see all the future webinars that are coming through. And as I said, we will be sending a link to this recording, and then you can rewatch it again. And if you have any more questions, get in touch with either myself or Andrew. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.